There was a time when living standards in Canada ensured that every family could own a house, have a stable income, have some money left over for vacations and things like that. And it was not too long ago when Canadians were able to do all of this.
You know, it really wasn't too long ago when you could just work a regular job, have a regular salary, and you'd be able to afford maybe a one-bedroom apartment for yourself, or maybe even put a down payment on a condominium in a big city like Toronto or Vancouver. But that doesn't seem to be the case now in Canada. A lot of young people are realizing that the standard of living in Canada has really been on the decline. We're going to discuss it in today's video, react to some videos as well relating to this topic, and also read some of your comments from some of my previous videos that are very relatable to what we're talking about today. With that being said, let's dive straight into it.
Chat, guess how much this house costs? This house alone, this small ass house, $5 million. $5 million for that damn ass fucking small ass fucking house, bro.
I mean, the outside does look nice, but if you were to tell anyone from the States that that house in Toronto, because it's close to downtown, or it is downtown Toronto, is worth $5 million, that there's no way there's more than maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms in that tiny house. $5 million, and we think the housing market is apparently crashing here in Canada. Definitely is softening, and we are seeing some prices go down, mainly in condominiums, but nowhere near the crash that needs to happen for the standard of living to actually increase for people who don't own a home. You know, a lot of people in Toronto and Vancouver don't own property, and they likely will never get into the housing market because of how bad the pricing is and how low salaries are relative to the prices of houses.
Like I said in my last videos, the only alive beings that you see in Toronto are immigrants, young children, and dogs. This place is dead, man. This place is dead. I've lived here for 35 years. This place kills people's souls, man.
Yeah, it is pretty soulless. I did leave Toronto as well a little over 2.5 years ago. I still go back, you know, every once in a while to visit friends and family, and it just doesn't feel the same anymore. You know, I really miss the Toronto that I grew up with, you know, the Toronto that was actually fun, exciting, and safe. We don't see that anymore. Also, the cost of living in Toronto is ridiculously expensive. I'm used to paying, 5% on top of what I purchase here in Alberta right now, and going back to Toronto always just blows my mind. It's like, wait, 13% I have to pay on top of what I already purchased the item for, or just like purchase the drinks for, or the bill at the restaurant, and you see that added extra tax on there. It really hurts. It really does.
There was a time when living standards in Canada ensured that every family could own a house, have a stable income, have some money left over for vacations and things like that. And it was not too long ago when Canadians were able to do all of this. So when did it all start going down for Canada? When? Was it 2015 when we elected a certain leader based on his looks? Or was it a different time frame? Was it the COVID time frame when every kind of infrastructure started failing? Everything, all the policies that were meant to help people apparently didn't help people. We were on those lockdowns. Immigration went wrong. We let in too many people. And all these things happened before Trump came along. So let's not blame Trump for our problems. How did Canada get so bad?
When I actually think back on my time in Toronto, when did things get bad there, the biggest city in all of Canada? I honestly think that it was somewhere around 2015. I remember a shift, like when prices of everything went up a little bit, going out was way more expensive, there was less cheap dive bars to go and have a few cheap drinks at. It felt like there was a little bit of a shift, and it was funny, it was ironic. Around that time, Toronto started to be seen as more of an international city as well on the world stage. You had people like Drake who were becoming more popular. You had The Weeknd come out of nowhere, and then you had a lot of eyeballs on Toronto as a city. And just like what's been going on in Toronto, a lot more eyeballs at international film festivals like TIFF, even though these, that was always around, but it felt like there was just a lot more focus in general on Toronto and Canada as a country. Maybe that had something to do with Trudeau, who has a very recognizable brand name, for a prime minister, get elected or something like that. I don't know, but it definitely felt like things started to shift around then, and things got a lot more expensive and a lot more unaffordable, and thus the standards of living in Canada ultimately went down. But if you think there's a different time period that you remember when the standards of living went down, leave it down below in the comment section. Praying for full-time work before the city gets even sadder. The economy is the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I don't disagree with this individual as well. It is ridiculous. It's so hard to find a full-time job anywhere. Sometimes you just have to balance, if you're lucky, 2 or 3 part-time jobs. And even those are really hard to find because the job market in Canada is so bad, with unemployment, over 7% right now, and even higher than that depending on certain cities. Here in Calgary right now, I did the research yesterday, it's actually 7.5% unemployment in Calgary. Minimum wage is going up though in Ontario as of October 1st, so you're going to see this, and it's already past that date. So now they must pay workers $17.60 an hour, and I don't know if that'll actually really do anything, sadly, because the last time I remember a massive increase in minimum wage, I was working downtown Toronto at the time, and on my lunch break, the day that it actually kicked in, I think is when it went up to around $15, just before it went up to $15 an hour. Places around the office, any place like a Taco Bell even, had their menu taped over and then a Sharpie with a new price. That's how bad it got. People think that, it's a magical elixir. As soon as you raise, the minimum wage, that it's just going to eventually, help everyone out. But really what happens for the most part, the cost gets passed on to the consumer, because a lot of these minimum wage jobs are service industry jobs. And that means that all of the stuff that you purchase, whether it's food, alcohol, drinks, anything out at a restaurant, maybe theater tickets or something like that, those prices will go up. So while other people are getting paid a little bit more, if they ultimately use services as well and go out, like to eat, like to drink, go watch movies, even the people paying minimum wage, even though their wages did go up, they're going to have to pay more just to live in the cities that they're in. Now we're going to get to the comments that are very relatable for today's video topic. So here's the first one. I purchased my condominium in 2010. My rent back then for a studio apartment was $525. And this isn't even that long ago, 2010. I was in my early 20s at that point. I remember that time period. It was very cheap. Toronto felt like a very affordable city, even though I didn't have a lot of money at that point. Recently coming out of high school, just starting college, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity, but you still had, relatively cheap rent. The rental property just came back on the market, and it's now $16.95 a month plus utilities and parking. Just thankful I purchased my condominium when I did. Absolutely, even though condominium prices are definitely crashing in Toronto, you are very lucky. You still have to watch out for those sneaky condo fees. They are absolutely brutal. I can't stand condo fees, and I've done videos on them before talking about how it feels like a bit of a scam, because on top of that, you also happen to pay property taxes, and it's like you have to pay property taxes on something that's in the sky on top of the condo fees. So brutal, absolutely brutal. Angry Canadian says, in 2000 I was making $15 an hour, good money at the time, and $600 for a 2-bedroom apartment. A 2-bedroom apartment for $600. Holy crap. I think I was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto in 2015 for just under $1,000. So it really puts things in perspective. Now we're up Schitt's Creek. Skipping either breakfast or lunch is the norm. I am pissed off. So that is really sad to hear. When you have to, forego your food and your nutrition ultimately just to be able to afford to live in Canada, that's when you know that we have really lowered the standards of life in this country. You leave your thoughts down below about this video's subject, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.